Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session at the Spring 2024 gathering. My name is Christopher Lehman, and you have joined the session, Ways Leaders and Teachers Can Protect Good Teaching in an Era of Bad Programs. And if you are anywhere near K-12 education right now, and if you've joined this session, you likely know exactly what I'm talking about. In this moment right now, we are in what, if you're a politician, if you are, well, if you are many politicians, if you are several education reporters, basically, if you have a job outside of actual classrooms where you're really next to kids and inside of schools all of the time, it feels like we're in this pendulum swing moment. Again, inside of reading instruction, there feels like there's these poles and we're kind of back over to the side. Again, if you're not in classrooms, we're to this side where phonics instruction, foundational literacy skills should take precedence over everything else. This is at least what people who are nowhere near schools believe. If you are someone who is ever actually inside of a classroom or anywhere near schools at all, then you know that all of us as educators are continually studying, learning, and growing our practice. So are there some educators that in this moment, with everything that's being talked about by politicians and several education reporters and publishers, if you want to learn more about phonemic awareness, for example, or if you feel you don't have the right tools for supporting students with dyslexia, or you want other ways of supporting students who are working on their spelling, for example, great. There's lots of things you can learn and lots of places you can go, lots of books you can read, and really smart people doing really smart research around that. That is absolutely true. There are also people for 30 years plus have already been doing that inside of their classrooms. This is not news to them. And I say more than 30. There are equally so people who are really good at phonemic awareness who have been studying ways to confer with writers, and they want to get stronger at that. There have been people who are good at phonemic awareness, good at conferring with writers, and they've been spending time recently really thinking about, is my classroom and the text I choose inclusive? And so I want to spend time looking at my classroom library, looking at the text that I read from, and making sure that I'm engaging the whole lives of children inside of my room, and they're studying that. There are people that are studying project-based learning. There are people that are studying cross-content collaboration. There are people that are studying ways to have book clubs in their room. There are so many things that we can study in education. This is just one. So if you are actually in schools, actually in classrooms, you know that all of these things are things that people in your building right now, some of them do exceptionally well, and others do different things exceptionally well. And we all love opportunities to learn. But if you are a publisher and you want to sell some stuff, boy, oh boy, is this the time for you. So I previously have written before today a blog post that you can find on community.theedcollab.com called Protecting Good Teaching in an Era of Bad Programs. I'm going to just give a few highlights from that, but then I mostly want to stick to what's the proactive stuff that we can do. This session is really on ways leaders and teachers can do that sort of protecting. I also would love for you to reach out to me on social media. You can find me in lots of places at @iChrisLehman. I'm currently the most active on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook, so you can find me there. So on this blog post, there's a lot of links to some of the things that I'm going to describe now, and I'm just going to do a quick run through of this. But if you're anywhere near actual kids, you will know many of these things are true. So states, not all, but many states and some large districts inside of states have decided that in the guise of this political movement, the research, just come here for a minute. Let me stop sharing this. The research around foundational literacy has been robust and going on for decades. There are so many terrific places that you can go. For example, I really find valuable the Institute of Multisensory Education. I think they do terrific work in this. I've taken some courses with them. There is a whole body of research that's extremely valuable. Currently, though, a lot of politicians and publishers are acting as if no one has ever heard of these things before. And so their answer to that is to sell you programs. And the idea of those programs is that they will fix teaching. And a lot of those programs are terrible. I'm using my legally protected right to critique here. So let's look at a few things that make them terrible, and then let's talk about solutions. And again, you can go to this part 1 in this blog series to read more about all of these and find links to some of these things as well. So problem number 1, curricula are bloated. Again, if you are anywhere near kids using some of these curricula, you know the experience of saying, how am I supposed to do this all in one day? I don't know who thought this was one day's lesson. That's with many of the approved curricula. On top of that, there are a lot of other approved curricula that not only have too much stuff, but feel almost impossible to navigate. Well, I'll talk about one of those offenders in a moment. So it turns out that that thing you've been feeling actually really happens. So one of the education journalists who has written a lot about this moment as if no one ever knew that foundational skills were important before, Natalie Wexler for Forbes, in February, she wrote this: literacy experts say some EdReports ratings are misleading. And in that article, she says, people I spoke with say these basals include more activities and features than any teacher can possibly get through within one school year. While there may be some high quality text in the mix, there's also a lot of time wasting fluff. What I am curious about is this article, I think didn't quote any actual teachers currently practicing. If I'm getting that wrong, my apologies, but there certainly weren't very many people that were quoted inside of this article. So people I spoke with could have been a lot of people. But if you are an actual teacher or leader inside of a school, you know this is true. For example, one of the programs that this article talks about, named specifically, and I have had direct experience with working with schools that use this, is HMH's Into Reading. If you have recently adopted Into Reading and you don't know what is going on, I will say that in my own personal critique, I would call it bonkers. I don't know who looked at that final product and said, this is good. To me, it is a program that needs many seasoned professionals with multiple degrees to all work together to try to understand. I find it so incredibly confusing. And this article from Forbes specifically names HMH's Into Reading as one of those examples of a program that is overly bloated. So how did we get to that? My blog post says more, but just briefly, EdReports. So EdReports is a tool. It's funded by lots of philanthropic organizations, including the Gates Foundation. EdReports purports to empower districts with free reviews of materials to try to offer evidence-rich, comprehensive, blah, 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 blah. Basically, the goal of EdReports is that you want those little green bubbles. If you get those green bubbles from EdReports, chances are a state will approve you, because a lot of politicians have never been inside of a classroom, haven't taught before, so they don't know what teaching is like. So the best place to go is someone else deciding that for them. And we could actually ask the teachers in the districts in our schools, but why do that when we can go to a website? So on this particular website, they review curricula through their own metric. And I will say this, God bless you, EdReports, you do you. However, when you make a decision about what goes into a metric, you are always making a decision about what to value and what to undervalue. And according to this Forbes article, what EdReports valued was stuff. What they undervalued was usability, which is a bit strange because they literally have these two gateways, alignment and usability. However, if you have ever touched HMHs into reading, or a bunch of other programs that I mentioned in the article or in the blog post, and I may say here too. There are a lot that are so confusing and so hard to use. The Forbes article says what we all know from experience. Though they talk about usability, they greatly undervalued it. So what you end up with is what the Forbes article calls time-wasting fluff. So that's problem number one. Another problem is that there are a number of packaged curriculum that valued stuff over usability, but also valued stuff over actual children's lives. So the NYU Metro Center at Steinhardt School of Education focuses on research on equity and the transformation of schools. And in one of their reports, Lessons in Inequity and Evaluation of Cultural Responsiveness in Elementary Curriculum, they looked at 3 of the most popularly adopted curricula. These aren't the only 3 that are worthy of critique, and these aren't the only 3 that exist clearly, but these are the 3 that they looked at: McGraw-Hill Wonders, HMHs into Reading, there they are again, and Savas My View. And what they found is that through their research and analysis, these 3 programs are either culturally insufficient in some areas, like in first grade, or culturally destructive in others. They have a number of reasons of why they call it culturally destructive. One of them is they say something to the effect of representations of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are stereotypical and damaging inside of teacher materials or inside of texts that students are reading. So if my district values all children's lives and the inclusivity of our school culture, I would not want one of these programs inside of my children's and teachers' hands. And again, it goes back to what you value. So there is no metric on ed reports, at least in these big green bubbles, that clearly and explicitly says, is this culturally affirming or culturally destructive? So if a state didn't take that into account, they may be offering programs that the NYU Metro Center says are damaging or destructive. Then we have another issue, and this just makes my head spin around. I do not know how to make sense of this. This feels like a poem trapped in an enigma, wrapped in a riddle. I invite you to please reach out to me if you can make sense of this. I cannot. So misalignment. So, okay, come here again. So help me with this. So states, I'm working through the logic. States effectively banned some curricula or homegrown materials in favor of others because of what the states believed is the right way, quote unquote, to teach reading. So their alignment to science of reading. It is very, very clear that the states do not understand science of reading, number one. And again, I'm saying again, I never said this. Let me say, there are heroes inside of state departments of education. I don't mean to broad brush you. There are hero politicians. There are heroes on school boards. There are heroes in district offices who see the nonsense and are trying their best to fight against it. Those people exist. Currently, they're in the minority in a lot of states. So state decision makers said, oh, you're writing your own curriculum? Well, not anymore. Oh, you bought that whatever? Not good enough. These are the things you must have. Okay, I guess maybe it's their legal right to do that. Fine. So they say here, these are the curricula you could use. The reason why is because these align to the science of reading in our mind. Does it actually? No. Is there valuable stuff to learn from the science of reading research? Certainly. The states say their version of it. Then the states approve curriculum and say you can only choose these curriculum because they align to foundational skills work of the science of reading. And then what I cannot understand is how so many programs have no foundational skills component, or the foundational skills component is horrific. It's terrible. So here's an example of no foundational skills. Some of you are in districts where you have adopted Great Minds Wit and Wisdom. The Wit and Wisdom curriculum specifically says on their website, the best materials for literacy development success may not always come in one box. Wit and wisdom that the state said does foundational skills, at least they're honest, so thank you, great minds, for that, explicitly states wit and wisdom that you bought because your state said you have to, does not have a sufficient foundational skills program. So here's the programs you could pair it with, like foundations that so many of you have already been using, or lots of other places you could turn to. Here's some examples. And because we're in a free market society, Great Minds also says, but if you already bought Wit and Wisdom from us, guess what, friends? You can buy Geodes. That is our foundational skills add-on. So just buy that other box of stuff from us, and now you got a robust program. Fine, that's their prerogative. They can sell whatever they want to sell. You as a consumer can decide what you want to buy. What I don't understand is why a state chooses programs such as this and mandates their curriculum when they don't even do the thing that the state says they have to do. You have to buy an additional program for that. Wit and Wisdom is just one example. And again, kudos to them that they actually said that out loud. There's others, like, I know I keep coming back to HMH and to reading, but I need to because I just find it not usable. HMH has a funky, their own version of some foundational skills stuff. It kind of sort of makes sense in the early grades a little bit, maybe not really. And then as you move up, it becomes bonkers. The American Reading Council, for example, their program core, I think they have a pretty nice set of stuff that came from actual researchers for some of their younger grade stuff, like their little table tents at their small group. Those are great. Those seem fine. As you move up into grades, they either disappear completely, or again, they're just kind of like little bits of add-ons. There's not a clear scope and sequence. So what a lot of people are finding is that their assigned curriculum, because the state said would teach foundational skills, doesn't do it well. And so they have to find other stuff. I will also add into this, there are things that need to be taught in a literacy life of children, like how to write. And most of the published curriculum barely have a writing component, or it's mostly writing in response to a text that the teacher read to you. There's a lot of response to reading sorts of writing. It feels very test preppy, but actually teaching students to write, a number of districts I work with, they find that there is not a robust writing component to a lot of their programs. So there's also misalignment there. And I'm sure there's plenty of other places you could look as well too. All of this fits under the big category of deprofessionalization. There is this feeling from a lot of leaders, and not all, again, there are heroes, and thank you, please keep fighting heroes wherever you are, but there are a lot of decision makers in state legislatures, inside of state departments of ed, not everyone, but they are there, maybe inside of some districts, especially some large ones, that have a very real sense that a program knows better than people. And when we're talking about ways that leaders and teachers can protect good teaching, that is the very first place that we need to go to. That is to say, we cannot join in that political drumbeat of teachers don't know what they're doing, and we have to, well, I don't know, make sure that they learn a program with fidelity because the program knows better. I also would say I've heard a lot of professional development folks, especially around foundational skills work, saying, there's this phrase that comes up a lot that just really bothers me. So I just want to highlight it for a moment, saying, it's not your fault you never learned this. Teachers, it's not your fault. In your graduate program, they never. Teachers, don't, it's not your fault. Your school never taught you. I find that, I know, I get the idea of why that's being said. I think it's folksy, you know, it's like, hey, we're in this together. It's not our fault, it's them. I find that just truly demeaning of us as a profession. I find that demeaning of schools of education. I find that demeaning of school districts invested in strong learning. And I find that demeaning of teachers themselves, because a whole lot of you have been doing very thoughtful foundational skills work for a very, very long time. And again, some of you are learning or beefing up what you've learned, but there's other things that other people are learning too. So I'll get off my soapbox for that. I just wanted to say, don't add into the deprofessionalization of the moment. So what are things that we as teachers and leaders can do to protect good teaching? So here are a few practical things. Number one, we have to counteract deprofessionalization by being professionals. If you're a leader who has hired people to work for you, that means you believed in them. You chose them for a reason. They are there. They have expertise, whether they are brand new to teaching or they've done it a long time, they are there and they have something to contribute. And we need to treat them as professionals. Strong leaders, you know this already, but just to say we have to do that. We also, as classroom teachers, who may not be in a leadership position, we also have to treat each other and our leaders as professionals too, because just to shout out to leaders for a moment, strong leaders are also pulling their hair out in this moment too. So your thoughtful instructional leaders who have roles above you in your district hierarchy, please support them and talk to them as well, and know that they are stuck between lots of forces too. So what are some ways that we can be professionals? So there's lots of things to say, but let's think particularly with programs. If you have a mandated program that you feel that you are forced to use, what are things you can do? So the first place to go is to have open collaborative decisions and conversations around your values. Before fully digging into a program, we first need to know what is our approach to literacy here in this district. Inside of our school community, what is it that we rely on, believe in, need to do? If we believe in student choice, if we know the research on that, we believe in it and we value it, and we know that students will eventually graduate from us and will have free choice for the rest of their lives of where they're going and what they're doing. So we want to build those skills now. If you believe in choice, you have to name it, list it, put it on chart paper, put it on a shared drive, choice. And then when you open up a curricula that minimizes choice or has no choice at all, you then know there's a mismatch between our values and that. So do I need to better understand where the curricula is coming from? Maybe there's a research basis for it. Okay, well, look, if there's none, which sometimes there isn't, then we know that's something we need to fix. That is a hole in our program. If you believe in strong, meaningful supports for multilingual learners, because they are inside of our classrooms, and it's not just a little box that a program added, like for multilingual learners, give them sentence frames, the thing that they put. If you know you need to invest in and support multilingual learners, and that tier 1 instruction is multilingual instruction, that's your value, put it on the list. And when you don't see it in a program, that's a place you need to fill in. So having those clear conversations really matter. Any program that comes, it is not, your school district is not the American Reading Council School District. It is not the Saba School District. It is not the Great Minds School Districts, because, let me stop sharing again for a moment here, because if someone wants to critique the teaching and learning in your district because the test scores, or because they did a walkthrough, because whatever, they don't critique the program, they critique you. It is not a, well, HMH lowered test scores in our school. No one talks about that. Everyone talks about your school. So remember, everything you do and decide is yours, because people will make you own it. You can own it too. So we need collaborative decisions. From those collaborative decisions, it's important to set clear options and guardrails with our programs. This is just helpful for everyone, for professionals to be clear on what it is that they need to focus on and what they don't. It also can make a clearer sense of where things are going. So options might be, as a staff, as a community, as a whatever, we have decided any text that you want to change you might be an option. Or you might say, you can select any text from this group of text that has already gotten board approval, because there's a legal process that we have to go through, but also we as a department have decided match lots of goals. They are thoughtful, dense, they support grade level reading, they're inclusive, et cetera. So you're deciding the shape of that option for teachers. You also need to decide the guardrails. You may not love all the programs that you're using. The more workable ones we'll just work with for the time being until this political movement changes and there's a new initiative which will eventually happen. It will eventually happen. Nothing in education sticks, but until that time, you need guardrails. So what does it mean in your district to do the mandated curriculum? Does it mean we have to do all the units, or does it mean we can do units 1, 2, and then you pick 3, 4, 5 between those? Does it mean we do every week of the unit? Or in some, like American Reading Council, for example, in a lot of their units, they become very repetitive as you move through weeks. Can we agree to the first 3 weeks we are all going to do, and then the last 3 you can decide? All of those are choices. Amplify, for example, there's text that you probably want to swap out. So which text can we swap out? What are the decisions? All of these are decisions to make and have clear together that respects professionals. And I'll just say this, leaders' jobs are hard too, and all of us have different roles for different reasons. Not every decision has to be we all come together and have a vote on it. That would take forever to get every decision to be made. So there need to be collaborative conversations. I think we also have to understand that for the sake of just keeping the ship going, sometimes the leader has to say, all right, based on your feedback, here are the decisions we have to make. Also say in reverse, leaders, please don't be afraid of that. So many teachers I work with say, I just wish we had clarity. Just tell me what you want and I'll do it. I just need to know what you want. And so have collaborative discussions and decisions, but then be clear. And then lastly, to be professionals, invest in your people. Programs don't teach students, people do. Poor teaching with a poor program leads to poor results. Poor teaching with a pretty good program leads to poor results. Great teaching with a poor program can sometimes be somewhat salvaged because there's thoughtful decision-making happening, and great decisions with great curricula lead to all sorts of good things. People need and want their skills to be developed. So make sure we're investing our time and energy into people as well. So the problem of bloated curriculum, what do we do with this? I, in that blog post and what I've been talking with the districts I work with around is what I've been calling reasonable fidelity. Basically, what I want to say is break away from the idea that we have to do everything word for word. And I talk more about this in the blog post and about each of these categories. No one is asking you to do word for word for word. And if they are, they don't understand how teaching works. Reasonable fidelity is deciding along this kind of spectrum here, what should I do with this program? A bunch of my districts are in states where they are mandated to use the program. And so we're looking at it as more like a guiding resource. You can't just put it away. You can't say like, well, half the days I'll use this and the other half I'll use that because the state, at least for now, is not allowing that. But we can figure out how to use what's there to guide us, but we're still going to make thoughtful choices inside of it. Another option is you might use that mandated curriculum as one piece of many. So if your mandated program doesn't have a robust writing instruction inside of it, you can use that with as much fidelity as you want. Your kids will not be stronger writers at the end of the year. They will not be stronger writers across years. And yet, in most states, students have to write for standardized assessments for life. They need to be able to write for all of their classes. They need to write. Students have to write. So if the program doesn't have a strong writing component, you likely need to find one. Is that fair? No. Is that the reality? Yes. So what do we do to have reasonable fidelity, whether it's bits and pieces or a guiding resource? One way to counteract that is we have to cut the junk. So part of that is based on those collaborative decisions. One very practical thing to do is make a roadmap. In Connecticut, for example, this year, a lot of districts just got the curricula that they're supposed to be using. And then next year, there's an expectation around their implementation. What I have done with some districts, this, for example, is from New York City, who is a school that was using HMH. I supported the leaders, instructional coaches, and teachers in mapping out what should we keep and what should we let go in order to cut out the junk. So in the HMH curriculum, which again, I find very convoluted, but there are a number of them that I find very convoluted. We did something like this. These were our column headers, so this is helpful for you. What's the week? What's the lesson number? What does the program say the lesson's focus is, or what did we have to infer the lesson focus is? Some programs, it's clearer, like Benchmark, it's clearer. American Reading Council, it's mostly clearer. HMH, sometimes you have no idea what it is. Amplify somewhere in that mix somewhere. Others are varying range, but sometimes it's hard to tell what the lesson focus is. So what's the lesson focus? What can we interpret the lesson focus is? What is the objective? In this particular school, they did I can statements. So we just wrote some I can statements. We had a column for steps because that's something we were working on for explicit instruction. It isn't written into all of these columns here, but for some we did. So that was some internal professional development we were doing. And then notes. And then we just started doing that. That way, the staff can focus on teaching, and everyone doesn't have to try to interpret this bloated mess of stuff. So for example, sometimes like if you look at like this lesson 4 over in the notes column on the far right of your screen, the chart is too complicated for this lesson. Note, the words are not basic sequence words like first, then, and last. Students instead need to pay attention to phrases. Here are things that you can reference. So having some kind of a roadmap, whether it looks like this or it looks like something else, that roadmap, that basically is explicitly saying this is how we as a community are going to interpret this program. And here is where you can focus your energy, is extremely helpful. And there's many ways you can approach that. I have districts that we've done this where just a few leaders have done it. So like a teacher leader, a coach, an administrator, and I've helped. Some districts, there's like curriculum writing at the end of the year. Teams of teachers that have already piloted the curriculum then go back through and say, okay, what's doable, what's not, based on some of our goals. So that is approaching that. Damaging curriculum. My only advice is you got to look somewhere else. At the Educator Collaborative, we firmly believe that just as folks like to talk about right now, the students' right to read, and they're interpreting that in many different ways. We believe that students deserve to be seen and protected and affirmed inside of our classrooms, and that students deserve to see one another and to both feel and learn to empathize, support, and affirm others as well. We absolutely do not accept that students need to be faced with text and curriculum that demean them, that talk down to them, that cause fear, whatever it is. We believe that students deserve to be seen and to see each other. So if you have a curricula that is considered damaging, or any text that you're reading that you're noticing, this doesn't seem to quite fit, here's the main 2 categories I would give you. One is, if you can, dump that curriculum and demand better. If you looked at the NYU report and you find it concerning and your district has adopted that program, send that report to the decision makers, talk to your staff, your colleagues, and say, we need to do better. What do we do? And perhaps it means choosing something else. If you're in a situation either by mandate or financially, because districts spent a ton of money on these programs, buying these new programs, if you can't, then you need to fill holes and avoid harm. There are a number of smart educators doing work around this. At the Educator Collaborative, we do this as well. You can look to Joellen McCarthy, Julia Torres, our book ambassadors in the Ed Collab. They're constantly posting about great text. I love Sonia Cherry Paul's work. Through all the work that she does, including her new book that's coming out and a lot of her posts on social media, she's talking about texts that concern her and things that we could do with them. Lorena Herman, many, many more. Do not accept damaging experiences for children. You can look elsewhere, or if you can't, at least work to fill those holes and don't give up. Misaligned curriculum. Here we need to invest in people. We need to not only fill in the holes that should not even be there if we've been mandated these curricula, but also we need to invest in what people do. Again, programs don't teach, people teach. What that means is we need time to study methods and not stuff. We also need to protect time inside of our districts, inside of our school day or school week or school month to talk about teaching. So let me break these down a bit. Let me start with classroom decision makers. A lot of us, though not all of us, which also is so incredibly frustrating, but a lot of us thankfully have some co-planning time, department time, PLC time, whatever it's called. We have some time where we're together. I know that lots of times that time together can turn into logistics. That we have such limited time, so we're like, okay, field trip slips, let's make sure we get to that. What's the bell schedule the other day? Oh, you know, like those sorts of things. That's necessary, we need to do that. However, one thing that we can do to invest in each other and our own learning is to make sure we're protecting at least some of that time that we're together, to not just talk about logistics, but to talk about teaching, having a book study, watching the Ed Collab gathering, sharing your own practices, talking about instruction, reading articles, just working on your own teaching. Instructional coaches and districts that are lucky enough to have those are terrific in time like this. We need to protect that time. If you are a leader, teachers need time to do that. Whatever you need to do to create a schedule that supports teachers talking about teaching, please do that. Then that first bullet, supporting time to study methods. I 100% believe it's fair that you need some time to hear from the people who sold you the curriculum, how the curriculum's supposed to work. I think you do need some just like unboxing, looking at stuff, where does it go? You deserve that. All of your professional development cannot be that. You also need time on methods. So one example, one of the districts I work with has adopted a curriculum that was mandated to them. The leaders invested some time in learning from the packaged curriculum folks, but then also are working with us at the Ed Collab, like I'm working with them, to just talk about methods. Because programs come and go. Grade levels that we teach change, students come and go, configurations of what we're teaching can change, methods stay with us. If I understand explicit instruction, I can apply that to anything I'm teaching. If I understand responsive instruction, having students turn and talk in the ways that I listen in and observe and make decisions from that, I can do better with any program I'm handed. If I understand how to model my own thinking, I can help students. If I know gradations of text complexity well, I can listen to a student read and I can more explicitly teach into their needs. If I understand development of phonics, then I know a student's spelling patterns, those are actually acceptable for first grade. I'm not going to over focus on that, but this kind of, or these end of word issues that the student is having, those I do need to address. The more I understand methods, the more I know the content of teaching, the more exceptional my teaching will be and the better I will support kids. So for example, districts that I work with, one part of what we do is going into classrooms and teaching lessons. I will model lessons sometimes. Sometimes I'll set up the teachers to work together, plan a lesson, and model lessons with students. And then we discuss it. What were the teaching moves inside of it? This was a lesson observation guide, which also some districts I've been working with said, well, I'll just use this as our lesson plan because our program's lesson plans are constantly changing, kind of hard to use. Here's one I could use. So that is investing in methods. Whatever you do, sage advice from a principal in New Jersey, Tom Marshall, he has said to other principals, he advises that you have internal learning and external learning. The way he describes that is you have a rich wealth of expertise inside of your district. You need to learn from one another, and you need to support teachers in showing and sharing the expertise. That's one part. Another part is that you become an insulated bubble very quickly. The things that you know about your own community can get kind of closed off to other conversations. You also need external learning too. That could be having someone come in and do professional development with you, like we do at the Ed Collab. That could be inviting speakers. That also could be reading books, watching the Ed Collab gathering, other online learning, whatever it is. Tom Marshall in Paramus, he talks about that you need a balance of both. You are learning internally and also finding ways, whether it's services you're paying for or it's free opportunities like the gathering, to learn. So all of these are ways to take the culture of deprofessionalization and trying to be more like professionals together. So the work that is in front of us right now is challenging. It is scary at times. It can be exhausting. But I know if you are listening to this, you are someone who cares deeply about your own growth and learning as an educator. You care deeply about the lives of children around you, and you care deeply about your community. In this moment that we're in, where we are surrounded by a lot of bad choices and then some okay ones too, we cannot sit idly by and allow this to happen. Because a first grader only has one shot at being a first grader. A fourth grader only has one shot at being a fourth grader. A ninth grader only has one shot at being a ninth grader. We can't play around with their experience, hoping that a program knows better than us. Because I will point blank tell you, programs do not teach, people do. I would love to hear your responses, your work, your questions, anything else at all. We also would love to connect with you, even work with you. You can reach me and us at theedcollab.com. There you can learn a lot more about what we do, as well as a contact form. You can also find me on social media at Chris Lehman right there, and you can write to us as well. So thank you so much for joining this Ed Collab session. I hope you have enjoyed the day. Please go back and watch some of the other recordings. And thank you for all that you do for your students, for your colleagues, and for this amazing profession. Have a great rest of your day.